May I have your attention for a very important public service announcement? We are taking over the internet, and the United States champion of word wrestling entertainment has returned for another edition of the Pocket Locker podcast. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, folks, I am in airplane mode. Gang, it's so good to see you all here. Glad you are gathered around the fireplace, so to speak, for today's stream. Good to see you all in the chat. We're gonna go ahead and jump straight into it so we could keep it weeknight tight around here, as we like to say. So the first thing up on the agenda, y'all, has just been more developments related to the students protesting for Palestine, the pro-Palestinian protest. And one of the narratives that has come out of this, like every other struggle for justice, is this narrative of the outside agitator. And so we're going to take a look at a piece that hopefully helps put that to bed for people. Also, quick shout out to Skeptic Haven. I believe I'm scheduled to be on the Sunny Spot tomorrow at 8:00 p.m. So definitely come over there and check us out.
As pro-Palestinian and anti-war protests spread to college campuses across the country, there was one phrase that kept popping up.
Outside agitators. Outside agitators.
Those outside agitators.
Them as outside agitators.
Outside agitators.
Outside agitators.
Outside agitators.
Paid outside agitators.
Outside agitators.
In recent days, university administrators, law enforcement officials, politicians have all trotted out that familiar trope, the so-called outside agitator, accusing professional organizers or nefarious foreign actors of hijacking student-led protests and encouraging its participants to adopt more aggressive and violent tactics. Just yesterday, a bipartisan duo consisting of Congressman Republican Mike Lawler and Democrat Josh Gottheimer called on the FBI to investigate those supposed shadowy figures. A similar sentiment was shared online by the NYPD chief of patrol, who accused a, quote, unknown entity of radicalizing our vulnerable students and taking advantage of their young minds. He urged his federal partners to, quote, follow the money. Now, we should be clear.
Now, this is a point I brought up the other day, but we're going to stress it again. These students observed, they organized, they did follow the money, and that is what led to their demands of disclosing, divesting, and also in many cases boycotting their institutions' financial entanglements with Israel. So that's exactly what they did. The other thing that's so interesting about this is what we want our students to do. We talk so much about universities being embedded within the local community, and you want to see that your students have the ability to engage with what's going on in the world and to make what's important to them important to people around them. And we celebrate the university's ability to do that. Man, I remember at Penn State, there was a whole magazine dedicated to it, and an expression, what we call town and gown. Gown sort of referring to the students who are matriculating through their education, ultimately towards graduation, when they'll have on the gowns in town. Literally the fact that the university is situated in a town. And so town and gown are always referred to the sort of interchange. And so that's something I just wanted to bring to this conversation, you know, as somebody who has an academic job, right? And just that's kind of my whole thing with this is like I'm an academic and I feel a certain type of way about this as an academic. And this is one of those things. It's one of those things that feels like there's a bald-faced hypocrisy, or like we're flat out just lying to students when we sell them on this idea that we really want them to be change agents in the world, that we really want them engaged, we really want them making a difference in the community. And then when they do it, we punish them for it.
Clear here. Some of the hundreds of people arrested at campuses across the country over the last few weeks have not been students, including at Columbia University, where city officials say 29% of those arrested last week had no connection to the school. But as the New York Times reports, there's little evidence that those so-called outsiders had any role in organizing or escalating the protests. In fact, many were arrested without ever having set foot on campus. And according to a review of police documents, only a small handful of the nearly 36 arrestees lack ties to the university had also participated in other protests around the country. Quite a blow to this professional protester narrative that is being pushed around by law enforcement. The Times examination also revealed that far more of the unaffiliated protesters had no such histories. Instead, those demonstrators said they arrived at Columbia in response to social media posts or word-of-mouth invites. And that includes Matthew Cavaletto, a 52-year-old computer programmer who's lived within a half a mile of Columbia University for most of his life. Cavaletto was arrested on the street outside the school after he stood in the middle of the intersection and refused to budge. The native New Yorker dismissed the notion that nefarious outside actors were pulling the strings, describing his fellow non-student protesters to the Times as, quote, members of the community, folks from the city, folks from our neighborhood, not some kind of foreign element that had snuck in to sap our city's vitality. One Barnard.
All right, I think I'm also streaming from Gather. I think I've got the audio shared. Steph, could you say something? I think the people can hear you.
I'll say something, Jay.
All right, give me one second. All right, yeah, it's good to go. All right, so Steph, I know you probably have a lot of thoughts and we'll keep flowing through things, but can you speak particularly to this issue of sort of college students and protest and sort of them bringing in people from outside the campus?
Oh my God. You know, this whole episode is reminding me of my, late teenage years when back in 1968, 1969, 1970, there was a great deal of ferment, not just on college campuses, but in high schools. The issue, of course, at hand during those days, well, a couple of issues were racial justice, and the other was justice for the Vietnamese, for the people of Southeast Asia, and America's involvement in denying that their rights. And it was of particular note to a number, at least half the population, those who were male, who happened to be like 17, who knew that within a year or two, they would be sitting before a draft board and maybe going down to the induction center. And these were matters of not just moral import, but of personal consequence. And I've been impressed with the centering that these kids are doing around the moral issues. It's been something that's been I haven't seen this in over 50 years.
Wow.
I feel like this is a thing, and in those days, of course, there are people who are active back in those days, as in these days. Of course, there are people who are active in the movement, who are coming to address
Right.
students who are concerned. I mean, most famously in those days, one Howard Zinn, who was a professor at Boston University, who wrote A People's History of the United States. He was a faculty leader in the student movement in those days. There are similar characters today, and a number of those people in academia are today being equally excoriated by the same people who were going after them then. You have to remember William Safire, who was a speechwriter
Wow,
for
that's
Spiro
interesting.
Agnew,
Yeah.
nattering nabobs of negativism, effete core of impudent snobs. The same language is being applied to the people who are standing today, not being anti-Semitic, but anti-colonialist, anti-genocide. I mean, when tens of thousands of people are being killed for the purpose of going after a cadre of people who committed a terrorist act, I have to think of the U.S. Army officer in Vietnam who quite famously said we had to destroy the village to save it.
Unbelievable words to come out of somebody's
It's
mouth. But yeah, Steph, I hadn't really thought about that. The way in which a lot of faculty members and people now were in fact involved or around for those protests back then, and they now find themselves and
well, now they're either emeritus or senior, but they're out there.
yeah. And I remember even when I was an undergrad, there were certain things I didn't understand. Like I know, when I wanted to start my marijuana reform organization, it was, the first person I asked to be our faculty mentor declined. Not because they didn't care about the issue, but because they didn't have tenure. And they thought, given the nature of the issue and things like that, it'd be better for us to have a faculty advisor with tenure. And so that's the route we went. And now that I find myself looking towards like a faculty position, I'm like, yep, no, I understand. I understand.
Oh yeah.
I've seen the language when you're pre-tenure or non-tenure. It's like they can get rid of you for any reason at any time, or just simply not renew your contract.
And then where do you go?
And
Because
then,
you've made all of these preparations in a career where I'm sure Jay, that with your qualifications you could probably find work in the private sector, but it's not the jam you want to be spreading on your toast, if you know what I mean. I
yeah,
mean, you want to be doing this kind of research, and there are very few places that you can actually do that outside of an academic setting. And when you're talking about people in political science or in history or in the non-STEM fields, you're basically, if you've got that level of achievement in education, there's nowhere else to go. Really, there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
When a guy who drops out of college, drops out of college and gets a career as a carpet launderer and then makes a name for himself in the gaming world, can sit there and debate a man who who uh, a man who has a doctorate and teaches you know, graduate programs, including doctoral programs at a major university, and has more followers on YouTube than that guy does, and appears to the general public as having some level of expertise on a subject that he first became aware of on, say, October the 7th. You got to wonder what the fuck's wrong with things here.
Yeah, yeah, and this is Destiny v Mark Lamont Hill for those that don't know. All right, let's. I'm gonna roll tape and try to get through some more of this. But thanks so much for joining me, Steph. I think Maya and Tsumami are back here as well. All right.
College student explained to NBC News why she thought officials were pushing this outsiders trope. Quote, I really struggle a lot with the whole narrative of outside agitators because I see it as a means through which to justify violence. And to claim that because individuals are not students, they are deserving of police brutality. Blaming unnamed outside actors also accomplishes another goal, distraction. Distracting from the protesters' primary aim, which is to bring attention to the war in Gaza. We should call out this boogeyman narrative for what it really is, an effort to discredit, delegitimize, and marginalize an entire movement. And honestly, it isn't anything new in this country. This same outside agitator trope was frequently evoked during the civil rights movement, used to imply that protesters were driven by the sinister agendas of unknown shadowy figures, as opposed to being motivated by their own personal beliefs and concerns. Even civil rights giant Martin Luther King Jr. was labeled as an outside agitator since he was often called in to assist with demonstrations across the South. Not only did King reject that label, he also rejected the very idea of outside agitators. As he famously wrote in a letter from a Birmingham jail, quote, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow provincial outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its bounds.
And this is such an interesting thing to bring up with MLK, because so many of these fools that are spewing that rhetoric forget that he was arrested like 30 times. And so it's so clear to me where he would stand on these issues. And yet the same people who want to march out the judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, as though, you know, MLK would agree with their right-wing talking points, are the same people that are now cracking down on these students. Another thing that I think is interesting about this is, if you notice how the outside agitator language is used, it's always used against the left, essentially. In this case, it's always used to describe the pro-Palestinian protesters. But in reality, I think a lot of the non-student agitation has actually come from the pro-Israel side. A lot of times those people don't look like students. And furthermore, I think a lot of the anti-Semitism that they've seen has been outside influences, like people who are non-students that are saying and doing anti-Semitic things, and then that's being blamed on the students. So it's curious, because there's not just this narrative. We always have to look at how the language is used. And one of the things you can see when it's sort of a boogeyman is a great way to describe it. One of the ways you can tell something's a boogeyman is when it only seems to be a problem when one side does it. And this is another one of those cases. All right. And the other part of this is it's just sort of it's just a little bit longer of a piece, but it's basically sort of about the same thing. And some of this is like getting warmed up for maybe the conversation I have with Sunny, but also I'm just trying to really help people realize what these academic institutions are really like, and particularly trying to dispel this myth that these institutions are super liberal. And I think when you see them cracking down on students and things like that, it hopefully shows people like where they're really at. And that was kind of my point of bringing up, the safety that faculty members feel or don't feel vis-a-vis tenure in many cases. And that's why. It's because universities are not liberal, and you do not feel like you can just say or do whatever, because it feels like if you say or do something the university doesn't like, that they will get rid of you, and there's no protection for that. And I think oh, go ahead, Steph. I was just gonna say that I think sometimes that's why people don't understand why faculty are hesitant to get involved in these things.
Yeah, junior faculty are obviously at risk, and it's the senior faculty that that put themselves on the line. I can think of one particular instance. A guy by the name of Thomas Schilling was a professor of politics at Harvard University. Lived in my town where I was growing up back in the day. He wrote many tomes. If you Google the guy, you'll find out that he's written tons of articles, particularly on post-war strategy and nuclear strategy and thus and such. And he and Henry Kissinger were they were colleagues, and he was an advisor in the Johnson administration. Worked with Dr. Kissinger for years, and when the secret bombing of Cambodia happened, he not only spoke out against it as an illegal act, but he spoke to Henry Kissinger and said, "I can't," over a dinner table at his home, and said, "I'm sorry, Henry, but we just can't speak with each other any longer."
Wow.
It's and I knew his child, so it was like, yeah, well, that was kind of wild. But senior academics need to get into the fight. I can't think of one off the top of my head right now, but for sure, the notion of, as the gentleman just said, the notion of outside agitator has been this pejorative. And I'd like to ask you, who are the outside agitators in Charlottesville, Virginia?
Yes.
Were they the citizens of Charlottesville who were trying to tear down a symbol of slavery and white supremacy? Or were they the freaking Nazis that showed up and killed a girl?
Yeah.
Who are the outside agitators
it's always,
in that certain
it's always
stance?
to one side.
Who are the good people on both sides? I mean, this is nonsense. We need to, in 2024, the people of this country need to make a stand. We have seen the flipping on its head of people of goodwill with people who are insincere and simply want power. And we need to recognize the bullshit that's right in front of our eyes and call it out when it's there. We can't afford to debate the number of angels on heads of pins, epistemology or ontology or anything else, with people who literally want to put children into concentration camps. We can't do that.
Yeah.
That's a moral failing. And if we can't summon that kind of moral courage within ourselves, then we are in fact lost.
So
we can do better than this.
So one of the things too to think about is the sort of intersection and again it goes back to the debunking the myth of the liberal university. There's intersectionality in terms of senior faculty having the ability to speak up more securely and who is in fact senior faculty, right? Most of this faculty is disproportionately white and male, especially when you get to who actually has tenure at the institution versus who's tenure track versus who's non-tenure versus who's an adjunct and all of this. And so that's going to be a constraint then on how many faculty you actually have that are willing to speak out. And people need to think about when they think about these institutions.
And adjuncts are like this far above TAs.
Yes,
in the
exactly.
hierarchy,
Yes,
you know?
yes. I mean, a lot of them are not even full-time employees. Yeah. So it's, it's different. A lot of those younger faculty members, a lot of the faculty members that are, disproportionately female or people of color, they're usually new school and they're still going through the process. And again, this isn't to like crap on any particular institution. It's just something to think about because I know that rhetoric of the liberal institution and it's a bunch of Marxists and they're just so woke. It just is such a far cry from the day-to-day reality. And I just want to help people think through that. All right. We're gonna jump into this other story, y'all. And part of what we're gonna be talking about with this story is basically the universities punishing the students, the significance of that, and sort of the culture of threats that come out on the right wing and how hypocritical that is. All right, so let's make sure I hit the right buttons, y'all. Boom. I have to share it and gather first, and then switch screens here. All right, I think I did that right, but hit the wrong tab. There we go.
That would be a perfect reason not to protest if you were at ASU, by the way. Like
His
if you
allergies?
if you're like a pro-Palestinian protester.
Well, it's in the grass a lot of times.
Hang on. Nope, did it wrong. And then I think that's better. Yeah, it's better. All right. And then here, there we go. All right.
And, I get hay fever. And,
I don't know what you're doing out there, but I know that you're suspended and you're not going to graduate. And this is our first story that will bring you. So ASU student protesters barred from campus and barred from walking to graduation. I think we should also preface it that if you look at how many people were arrested, it was
at ASU specifically?
Yeah. Let's just concentrate on ASU. 70 arrested.
Okay.
But they weren't all students. 20 of them were students. So 20 of them, you've disappointed your parents, your grandparents, and the rest of your family. You will not be graduating.
Well, you say that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's true.
Oh, I think the parents are ticked
All right,
off.
hang on a
I
sec.
think
Pause this real
there's,
quick. We got to think about these numbers.
Okay.
But they weren't all students. From walking to graduation, I think we should also preface it that if you look at how many people were arrested, it was
at ASU specifically?
Yeah. Let's just concentrate on ASU. 70 arrested.
Okay.
But they weren't all students. 20 of them were students. So 20 of them, you've disappointed your parents, your grandparents, and the rest of your family. You will not be graduating.
Well, you say that.
Yeah.
All right. So I read a couple opinion pieces on this. Basically, somebody that was basically kind of along the same lines as these guys, thinking about they're learning some consequences, and another opinion that was basically more of the same mindset as me, which is like, this is a shameful embarrassment on the university, and you should in no way, shape, or form be doing this. This is going to be humiliating for the legacy of your university. But one of the things that they pointed out was like, this is 20 students. So again, ASU, let me look up real quick, ASU enrollment. Arizona State has like almost 75,000 students as of 2019. So it's probably still around that. Figure this was, between 70 and 80,000 students, right? Now, there are nationwide protests going on all over the country and actually all over the world with regard to this issue, right? And there's 20 students who were, so down for the cause that they put themselves in this situation. So again, when they're just talking about these beacons of Marxist, and again, the colleges are just so woke. When you just send your kids, you might as well just send them to DEI University because they're just going to be living under the tyranny of the left. 20 students out of 75,000.
And I don't know if that's
Not
true.
a liberal
Oh,
institution.
I think the parents are ticked off.
I think there's, and again, I would only tell you that I think it is dangerous. Well, dangerous is too strong a word. Judging protests in real time doesn't always turn out well. All of the reasons.
I can tell you, insulting mods is a bad practice. That's the bad business decision. My mods are the best mods.
It is. I am actually, as we speak, modding over on the line with Matt and Aaron Adair on the line, and yeah, you don't want to be screwing with the people with the wrenches because it's just a bad idea.
Yep. Sumami, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think when can you hear me?
Yep.
I think when somebody comes in literally regurgitating a white supremacist talking point, I don't understand why they don't expect the response that they're getting.
Why they don't what? Sorry, you got to talk a little louder. It's like hard.
Why they don't expect the response that they're getting.
Oh.
You can't come in here regurgitating fucking white supremacist talking points about Black Lives Matter and not expect the type of response that he's getting.
Yeah. I don't, well, honestly, and that's a really good question. And lately I've been afraid that the answer is that we've conditioned them to think that shit is okay. Like we've just bent over so backwards about what's acceptable in our spaces just because we're so desperate to actually have interactions with the other side that we've conditioned them that in these spaces we will tolerate that shit just so we can say that we've engaged with somebody who thinks differently than we do. Because it just seems to be all over the goddamn place.
I don't want to derail here at all, but yeah, I think that's true to a certain extent. I think it's really important for people to realize what the motivation is. It's like the classic the classic saying, "What is my motivation here?" For an actor, and it's like, if your motivation is to simply have debate, and you don't take into consideration the motivation of the other actor in that debate, like what are they trying to achieve? More frequently than is necessary, the motivation on another person's side, particularly those have expressed, shall we say, problematic, shall we say racist, shall we say fascist, shall we say Christian nationalist, shall we say any of these things,
all of the
beliefs above, is not to engage in actual epistemology, actual ontology. It's to get you into an argument where they can inject those more fundamental pieces of propaganda that they want to get out there and make popular in this space. That's what they really want. They don't really want to talk about the justification for a God belief. They really want to prove to their acolytes and their followers that
And listen to me, I'm sick of
armbands
it.
work,
I'm taking the gloves off.
and that the God that justifies their bigotry is a great and powerful God, and you can be too. It's just, you know, we got to get over this, the little bit of okey doke that's being played upon. A number of folk really need to recognize that this is what's really going on in this game. It's
Absolutely.
silly.
Hey, Ember.
Amber, good to see you.
Hello, hello. I have too many tabs open again.
Oh, no worries. Did you want to say something, or are you just hanging?
Oh yeah, I've got to edit the news for tomorrow, and I'm like, I haven't been in Gather in so long. Let's be in Gather while we edit.
All right, yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I'm streaming, so just so you know. But yeah, all right. I'm gonna roll the tape.
Okay.
Great to see you. Good to have you here. Oh, also, just quickly, just while you're here, plug what you're editing, so people know what to look forward to.
Oh, it's news for the transpositions tomorrow. It's a weird bunch. It starts with the protests in France and ends with an ad for HRT from 1926, and the ride in between is wild.
All right. Well, tomorrow, I think it's around the same time as it's tomorrow at 8, right? 8 Eastern.
Yep, 8
I
Eastern.
think. All right. We'll be watching. I have to check it after my appearance.
Excuses and arguments I see against any of these college protests today are the same I heard for, I went back and looked, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, the Afghanistan or Iraq wars.
Well, I hope it was
all
worth
the
it.
same arguments. And some of them believe it was, you know, a principle's an important thing to stand on.
I'm not sure that they really, I don't know if they really bought into whatever they were protesting, whether they knew what they were protesting or not.
I don't know what's in the hearts of all of them.
I don't know either.
I don't.
But I've got to believe that their parents are disappointed. I'll tell you, being a proud stepdad, 2 of the best days was seeing our son and our daughter walk at the.
All right, so this is going to be good, because this is where we get into
I'm
the
sorry,
grievance.
I just had to laugh.
No, but that's important. That's an important point, because that's what they're getting into. That's one of the reasons I wanted to show this. Is I want people to hear, you know, how they articulate their grievances, and this is one of them. And I've been saying this. I've been saying that a lot of the stuff you see happening in school boards and with the, you know, let's ban the books and let's get elected to school board so we can, you know, get rid of sex education and all this type of stuff. You're going to see it all throughout the entire spectrum. And this is how it plays out in higher education. And a lot of it is that the parental control, the parental rights sort of rhetoric, and also the rhetoric of consumerism, the rhetoric of I've paid for a service, I've paid for a product, and you owe me that. And we'll hear a lot more of that. Go ahead, Steph.
I just want to share a lyric out of my memory from Frank Zappa, 1967. I believe that the name of the song was Mama, and it's about this lament of parents saying where have the kids gone wrong, and it's kind of the same sort of sentiment that's on the Sgt. Pepper album, She's Leaving Home. It's and the lyric is, ever take a minute just to show a real emotion in between the velvet cream, in between the moisture cream and velvet facial lotion? Ever tell your kids you're glad that they can think? Ever say you loved them? Ever let them watch you drink? Ever wonder why your daughter looks so sad? It's such a drag to have a plastic mom and dad.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
Children, particularly late teens, early 20s, that young adulthood part of your life, have something to say. It seems to me that people forget what it's like to be a child. and it seems to me incredibly curious that either those memories need to be shoved down, and it's like, okay, is that the purpose of school, to turn you into an unimaginative person who can't remember what it's like to go play in the pond? I mean, so many people just seem to forget. But I think that these young people do not have the life experience. No, they don't. They don't have the they don't have the full knowledge of just exactly how oppressive responsibility can be, and may not be ready to fully accept it. But it's not like they're not thinking there's a better way. And in so many ways, let's think about those founding fathers and mothers. They were in their 20s and early 30s when, the people that wrote the Constitution, with the exception of George Washington, who was in his 40s, Ben Franklin, who was in his 60s, most of those people, Thomas Jefferson was in his late 20s. John Adams was in his early 30s. The people that we celebrate were young people.
Yeah.
Who were trying to reinvent a world. They didn't do it perfectly. Of course they didn't. But the notion that young people don't have ideas that are valuable and deserve to be listened to. Look at what happens in science. When are the most of the brilliance, most of the brilliant innovations in science come from people who are taking a look at the problem afresh.
Yeah, a lot of times they come from graduate students. I think it's important to give credit to that and to think about that in its context. Like, these are young people, and sometimes, because, like you said, they lack the life experience. There is sometimes a lack of depth to maybe their rhetoric or their organization or what they're doing. But I do want to commend them for
This makes sense.
that they recognize the importance of, like, standing up and being counted, that they recognize the significance of being on the right side of history, that they recognize the importance of showing up. It's very easy to get down on students, even as academics, and sometimes it's just a matter of pragmatics. You have students in your class that are more concerned about their grade than the content or curiosity that you want to drive them in the course. You have students that are distracted by their extracurricular activities, and sometimes they're struggling to show up in class. You have students that struggle. They're trying to get research experience, but they don't have great work habits because they don't have a lot of work experience, right? And so these are things that just sort of in the day in and day out you're just dealing with, because they're just the challenges of working with young students, and it is kind of what you signed up for. But when this happens, like Stephanie said, you just have to kind of pause and go, whoa, like these kids are serious. Like they're about that. They're not all the way there, but you're just going, oh, okay, no, they they know what time it is. And like so many people have said, they're taking their place in this great tradition of student protest. And I guess kind of my motivation for doing this is, for the most part, as academics, we don't have to worry about that. Like, that's not the gig. Like, I'll be honest with you, it's not the gig. Like, for me, the gig is like do biology research and teach biology. You know, for most, it's similar. It's research and teaching. Maybe it's writing and teaching. Maybe it's university service and teaching, research and outreach. Right? Like it's all this other stuff that is just normal academic life. And for the most part, we don't have to think too much about the role the institution plays in our democracy, for lack of a better way to put it. Once in a while, what happens is students get upset about an issue. Students, you know, they demonstrate whatever, they have a rally, they have an event, and it's fine. Like people, it just rolls, right? It's just sort of the ordinary course of it's ordinary course of operations. You know, the young Democrats are doing an event, and the young Republicans are doing an event on the other side of campus, and whatever. You just go on about your day-to-day business. What's so different about this is that it's such a serious issue that it's way bigger than what's going on campus. And then for me, the reason I felt the need to address it is because the university's response is so disproportionate and out of step with the understanding of the university's role in our democracy. And because of that, it's alarming, because in a way, the university's response, I think, has the potential to stifle democracy. I'll talk a little bit more about that as they get into their spiel, but just so people know, like, that's why we're here. We're here because when something like this happens, as long as the university has its sort of typical university response, it's like fine, whatever. But when the university starts cracking down and starts doing all this other type of wild stuff, it's like, whoa, all right, this is something much bigger and something that feels much more dangerous.
U of A. And then planning for a party and bringing family in.
Sure.
And
I'm going to a graduation this weekend.
Taking pictures. They're in their cap and gown. That's something that parents, you know, have always dreamed for their kids.
Sure.
And now you're going to have, I don't even know if it's the 20, but there's many of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to walk.
I know they canceled graduation. Columbia University, I want to say, just canceled it.
That's so awful.
Well, I don't disagree.
Why should you cancel it?
Yeah, I mean,
why can't like these are kids? So wait a second, hold on a minute. So you had 100 kids at Columbia arrested, and so for everybody else, you're going to ruin it.
And not all of them were students as well, you know.
Right. So just because 100 kids were, you know, arrested, you're going to, what about the thousands of others that go to Columbia? We're not going to have it now?
You had USC make the same argument.
Oh,
I don't understand
silly.
all the arguments against it, I suppose.
I'll tell you this. It was at a graduation party yesterday.
Oh.
And
appreciate that, PC. Yeah, smash those buttons, gang. Y'all know, if you're watching later, leave us a comment, but definitely like and sub if you haven't. We always appreciate that help. It's free and it definitely helps us grow. The word I'm thinking of here, y'all, is ambiance. You hear that sort of, again, like that consumer mentality, like a diner, right? Like, I'm going out to a restaurant and I just can't stand these protesters because I'm trying to eat my meal that I paid for, and they're boisterous, right? And they're ruining the ambiance. They're ruining this setting. And yeah, of course, some institutions did cancel graduation, and in some sense, maybe that's a win for the protesters, right? Because the idea is some of them they're trying to be disruptive. They're trying to shut it down until the demands are met, and if they don't think they can pull off graduation without too many disruptions, then okay. It's just a shame that these people don't realize that the other way to get graduation to go off without a hitch is simply to take accountability on the issue, take the students' demands seriously, meet their demands. They are, and it also shows you autonomy and agency, y'all, and power differentials. Because how many faculty do you have? Some of these schools, what's the faculty to student ratio? 15 to 1, 17 to 1, sometimes 30 to 1. What's the administration ratio? Right? The students are the bulk of the people at the university and provide the bulk of the economy. Faculty and administrators are an expense. Students and their tuition is usually where most of the money comes from. So
I was about to say,
go ahead, Steph.
Mention the cash, not to mention the cash.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. It's remember Ronald Reagan's "I am paying for this microphone." Guess what?
Yeah.
It also reminds me of that little bastard that was on that Fox News clip. Basically, he literally said, "I paid good money to go to this school and to
Yes.
attend this graduation."
Yes.
Basically, like, also it reminds me of the part from Dr. Zhivago when they are trying to protest and they're outside of the, I don't remember what building it is, that all these very wealthy people are upstairs having like a very lavish dinner, and like they've paid a lot of money to like have this like French dinner, and like these people are outside basically protesting because they're fucking like they don't have enough firewood, they don't have enough food, everything like that. And it's like the way that was like the same vibe. I don't want my nice dinner to be disturbed. I paid good money for this.
Exactly.
Fuck your pleas for fucking like leniency and just to live. Like, Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fundamentally not all
Tsunami,
that much different.
I really wish you wouldn't use this kind of fucking foul language in this fucking venue, because people get fucking
This is a
pissed
Christian server.
Go ahead, Ember.
I would think it's not all that much different from in the Victorian age, when there'd be like, newspaper boys and shoe shiners and whatnot, like begging for scraps out on the street, and the rich people are eating in the restaurant and saying, "Garçon, could you take care of that riffraff out front?" Like, you're starving people, and you're like, "Oh, they're ruining my good time."
Yes, and there's always been a cruelty to this sort of civility that people take for granted. And you got to remember, for a lot of us, it's like most of these universities, literally they're land grant institutions. They were built, based, and financed by the displacement and genocide of Native Americans. A lot of them were also then physically built and constructed with slave labor. And then the institution then also then excluded women, those same Native Americans and Black people, and everybody else. But they sat up there in those halls, sipping their tea, writing on the chalkboard, and having their high-minded debates, right? And so there's always been this sort of colonialist enterprise that universities are sort of inextricably tied with. And now I think it's coming out, and it bothers people because they're realizing that in our current context, universities are largely still the same thing, right? They're largely like our politicians in the fact that they're beholden to their owner donors, rather than their actual consumers and constituents. And it's quite sad.
I want to. I really, really wish I could get a hold of the clip of Abby Hoffman addressing the students at NYU in '68 during the demonstrations that started at Columbia, which is another story. Where he goes, where he's talking about prisoners' rights, and he's talking about some of them are in maximum security jails, and some of them are in minimum security prisons like NYU. It's like, oh,
wow. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Just crazy.
it's just, yeah, it's crazy, and it hasn't really fundamentally changed. We just accepted the prisons, and this is what the entire, starting back in the early 60s and the late 50s and early 60s, the Beats and the hippies and all of that, it was like getting out of the ruts of ways of thinking about women's roles in society, all sorts of roles and conventional realities, the cookie cutter nature of the educational system that fits people to the industrial world of the time. It hasn't changed. Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes, little
Yeah, yes.
all the same.
Yes,
You
theme
know,
song from
it's
Weeds.
and the children go to summer camp and then to the university, and they all come out as and they all go live in boxes, and they
And they all
all
look
look
just
just the same.
Yeah, yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, it's just we are not all the same. And the people that want us to be all the same will always fail.
Absolutely. Congrats, PC, on this graduation. That's great to hear. Yeah, and I think part of it is I think I hate to say it, but I think a lot of us buy into the notion of the liberal institution. I think that's what's happening for a lot of these students, right? Is they've always heard that the institutions were super liberal and super progressive. And then they got on campus and the university told them how much they care about diversity. And like I said, how much they wanted them to find their voice and change the world and make the world a better place. I mean, gang, I'm not kidding. Like, some of what y'all should do is just go to these universities' websites. You think I'm lying? I'm dying if I'm lying. Y'all know, like, they literally say things on their websites like, come to Dartmouth and learn how to change your life and change the world and make it great. Like they literally soup your head up. Like, you're about to come to this campus and like just set the world ablaze with your radical ideas. And then you realize, like, no, actually the university is not going to let you graduate because you set up a tent on the lawn. Like, do you understand? Like, these students are shocked. Like, their expectations and the reality, they're unfortunately learning the hard way. It's really sad.
I was sitting with some of my buddies, and I've got a group of friends. They're like 3 or 4 of their kids are graduating, and my one buddy goes, "Yeah, we're going down to the U of A. We're going to see our daughter graduate. They better not protest." And I said, "I don't blame you. It's the last thing you want to see. I don't want to see a protest at my kid's graduation."
I would tell you that I do think that you are, if the goal of the protest is to persuade or bring people over to your side, ruining someone's graduation might not be the way to go about it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's
I
just.
can acknowledge that.
Let's. I think that we've gotten to the point with the protests where they just like to annoy people. I don't really think they're out there.
I think that's a purpose of a lot of protests.
Yeah, I think they just want to annoy people. Like,
if they're protesting out in the middle of the desert,
if you get in front of me in the middle of the road,
right,
and you stop traffic, you're there to annoy me. You're not there because you care about anybody who's Palestinian.
But if they are protesting in Ajo, Arizona, in the middle of the desert, and are you really protesting? I mean, I think, listen, we don't have to like it. There's a proud history of protests in this country. But the idea is, in some way, shape, or form, to disrupt things. I believe.
So why don't we walk down this road for a moment?
They're so confused right now. They're literally talking out of both sides of their mouth. Like, yeah, dude, that's you're right. The reality is that protests are meant to disturb things. It's just crazy. The other thing I wanted to point out that's also very hypocritical in all this, and it ties back into that outside agitator narrative. These are the people who insist that it is their right to be disruptive, especially using their favorite target, which is normally college campuses. How often do we see some apologists in their 40s or 50s who literally harass college kids on college campuses for a living to make their fucking YouTube videos? And they just go up on campus and they want to sit here and literally debate students, if not, talk about how much homosexuality is a sin and all this type of stuff. How often do you see them want to go into classes? We literally see videos of them trying to break into the school so they can pretend they're students, so they can like get up in the cafeteria and talk about hating queer people. But when that happens, oh no, it's their right to freedom of expression, and they have to go where they can challenge people, and they have to be disruptive because the gospel is a radical message of love that cannot be impeded by university policy, and it doesn't matter that they don't go to school here because it's their freedom of religion, right? When people are pursuing healthcare and doing the things they want to do, and all of a sudden they want to protest and tell everybody they're burning in hell, they don't have no concern for people paid for goods or services, or people are handling their private business, and they have a right to do these things without being harassed. No, because then freedom of speech means their right to be disruptive. And so imagine these people who literally just berate college institutions almost on a daily basis. Now they're just so concerned that people aren't going to be able to enjoy commencement in peace.
Now grandma can't watch certain kids at ASU graduate, and now they're going to pass away without ever seeing that person. It's very terrible.
Oh my goodness.
Did ASU warn them?
Which ones?
Did ASU warn the protesters?
The ones who are being denied? Yes, they did.
Yeah,
they were given multiple opportunities.
Several times. So you have some of these kids at ASU that I had no idea. And I'm like, hold on. They had the megaphone out there, and I even saw this. They had the megaphone out there. They're barking at you guys, saying, listen, we're not going to let you graduate. You're trespassing. We have a school code of conduct. You're breaking both of those rules, and we're just going to say
I'm not a fan of all the codes of conduct, by the way.
That's fine.
Not a fan of them.
But if they say it over and over and over again, and they warn you over and over and over again, don't now come to me and say you're surprised.
I think there's a free speech argument when it comes to a state school, and I reject the idea that free speech only exists in certain areas during certain times of day, and that you can only say certain things. I think that's the antithesis of free speech.
But you don't make the rules. ASU makes the rules.
It's a state school, so they have to abide by the First Amendment. They don't.
This is also bullshit, and it feeds into the right-wing kind of talking points where there was nothing ostensibly wrong with what he said, but his sort of limiting it to like, oh, I feel like there's a free speech issue at a state school. Because again, they want to be able to have their private institutions and be able to suspend people's rights. You don't get to supersede the Constitution at a private institution. So these rights they're just rights. They're rights that everybody has at all times. And it shouldn't matter whether you're at a public or private institution. It's not okay to suspend your First Amendment rights just because this is a private school. And I think that's another issue here with these institutions. They all want federal dollars. They all want state dollars. They all depend on federal and state dollars. But then they want to be able to not have any accountability for the policies that they create on campus. And furthermore, this isn't really about campus policy. That's the coward's way out. Like, that's the problem. That's what's going to be a shame on these universities. Sure, you've got some restrictions around where you can put a tent or what hours you can do certain things, and in the normal course of business, that's fine. People expect those things to be observed, but people understand, again, the nature and the seriousness of the protest, and to punish these students is not going to be seen as anything other than the university trying to extract some retribution. And again, them being more concerned about the tents, the spray paint, the breaking of curfews. That's what they're citing. They're citing illegal encampments. They're citing breaking the curfews. They're citing them being like disruptive. Like it's literally disorderly conduct. Those of you know, like you from one of them states, boy, from Pennsylvania, like they'll get you with that shit quick when they just don't like what you're doing and they're not really sure what law to put it under. You know, it's just the disorderly conduct thing. That's basically what they're doing to these students.
Have a choice.
Okay, so here is Brianna. She's a senior at ASU, and she's shocked. She can't believe she's not graduating.
I mean, I'm a little disappointed.
Why are you smiling? Is it funny?
She's in the video she's smiling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why are you? Is this funny to you?
Yeah.
I don't think it's funny. I think if your parents, I don't think it's funny.
It's not fair to like read. I understand body language is important, but it's not fair to like read into a person's body language that way, because people just have these kind of sort of what I might call inconsistent responses to these type of situations. So you'll see this a lot, right? You'll see a lot of times if they put a camera on a person after a tragedy, like there was just some huge violent crime in their area, or you know, there was just a tornado or a volcano or a tsunami, like something really bad just happened, and maybe even like lots of people died and it was super dangerous. And you put the cameras, oh, so can you explain what it was like to, you know, try to survive through all this? They'll be smiling. Sometimes they'll even giggle or laugh or something like that. That's not because they're not taking it seriously. It's just it's a nervous response to realizing you're on the news. And there's a camera in front of you.
Right. I mean, that's a disingenuous attack, you know, an unneeded one. And we don't even know. Roll the tape. Let's see what she's actually upset about, rather than having
maybe I don't know if they play it or what.
Having these news guys basically jump in her shit right off the bat.
There she goes.
I'm being restricted from a lot of things right now that I didn't expect to be for standing up for something that I believe in. You know, I have family coming in who I have to
Pause it right there.
them know.
Pause it. Just pause it, Jay. I didn't expect to be standing up for something I believe in. That's a challenge. That is a challenge. That's a challenge to all of us. Do we ever expect to be standing up for something we believe in, or do we just find ourselves in a position where we have to?
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is the beauty of youth. I think the laughter and the surprise, and I think that really that's where the laughter came from. It's like, I had no idea I was going to be doing this, but I'm doing it anyway. I think that the young have this capacity that many of us have forgotten, to be surprised at the goodness that and the capacity for goodness that we have inside all of us. And we need to touch that again, because there's an awful lot of bad that we're willing to go along with because of our family, because of our lives, because of our situations, because of the things that we're in. We were talking about, well, now I'm in this, now I'm kind of on tenure track, but not really quite. And I don't want to jeopardize this. I don't want to jeopardize that.
Yeah, yes.
And it's, I think that's the gift that the young have, that to remind us of the necessity to do the right thing every now and again.
Can I
Sure.
give a counter argument? I think what she said was, I didn't expect to be restricted for standing up for something that she believes in. That's what I heard.
Yeah, me too.
And I
Me
think
too.
the reality is that a lot of privileged college students, and damn sure that a kid that's attending Columbia University has a hell of a lot of privilege.
Yeah, she's at ASU,
Don't
but yeah.
expect,
But yeah,
don't
go ahead.
expect the repercussions that come along with protesting that a lot of us have been dealing with for a long time.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad you said that.
I'm glad you said that
Yeah,
too.
I was gonna
because
say I don't think
that's the
Stephanie
other side
would
of the coin.
disagree with that. Yeah, that is, and that is actually kind of why I wanted to bring this up was, and it's fine to get into it here, because this is the intimidation and this is how it works, and this interacts with. I think Sumami, you're one of those people who too is concerned to the extent that which like a lot of them are just kind of going along with it, or this is the thing to do, right? This is the place to be. It's the it thing to be a part
I do
of.
feel like a lot of it is performative from a lot of kids, but at the same time, like I am grateful even if they're willing to do it on a performative level. Like at this point, if people don't fucking do something, they will literally wipe Gaza the fuck out and they will level that shit. Like if people don't do something, and so at any degree that people want to get up and say something and protest, honestly, like I should be grateful for that. But I am like, I do think that like a lot of these kids don't realize like when the shit hits the fan, you can end up in jail, you can end up with, you know, fucking charges, you can end up restricted. That's just how it is. That's why it's important to fucking push back. Like,
yeah, no, absolutely, and that's the fear, right? So, and that's how the institutions want these things to play out. First off, like what the guy said earlier, I meant to bring up is that's how the Overton window is moved. Like when the guy talked about people don't want to see that. I was talking to so and so, and she was looking forward to going to graduation, and she said, "Oh, I just don't want to see them protesting and da 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 da." The aesthetic, they're ruining the ambiance. Like I said, that's how the Overton window moves because that's what the institutions learn to hear and parrot when they want to come down on the students. Well, it's not that we don't support your right to free speech. It's just people don't really like to see protest at graduation, right? Like those are the things they're going to cite in order to justify being oppressive to the students. And with this thing, you have a similar thing happening where it's like shit just got real, and now students are realizing, oh shit, some of us got arrested. Oh shit, now some of us aren't allowed to go to graduation. And it's almost like they didn't anticipate this. And you wonder how many of them would have been dissuaded by this and will be going forward. Sorry, would you agree that that's the concern, Sumami? Like they're done now, right?
I think some of them will be like they'll, you know, basically go back to their parents during the summer with their tail tucked between their legs, but I think some of them that's just going to piss them off more. Like I think more of them that's going to piss them off more. You tell me I can't fucking walk and I can't fucking graduate because I peaceably protested. Like they have not destroyed things, and like this image that they're trying to give off, like these kids are being violent and ripping things apart, or like no, they're just fucking basically setting up tents and they don't like the way that looks.
Right. Even though they proved they were well justified in setting up those tents. So it's all bad. And I think that that's going to be the stain on the universities, right? Is that when we look back on this, it's not only going to be the students protesting, but it's going to be the fact that these universities had them arrested, in many cases did not act swiftly to have the charges against them dropped. Some schools did. We should mention that because that's important. Some schools definitely recommended to not charge their students, but others did not. And then some of them took these additional punitive actions against their students. But yeah, my fear is that it is going to be effective, or that other people take this signaling because this is what they want other people to think about. Like, you know, like Steph said, there's sort of the beauty in the youth, and that we haven't become entangled in so many responsibilities and other considerations that tend to lessen our motivation to get active when we need to. And now they're sending us clear messages like, fuck around like these college kids and if you want to, in the same way they were suspended. you know, if you and your colleagues decide to do this at work, you know, they want to make sure you're worried about being suspended, or you're worried about not getting promotion, or you're worried about your contract not getting renewed or whatever.
Yeah, but if they do it to enough people, or certain people, I think, like certain faculty members or certain students that a lot of other people, other students or faculty members look up to, or if they just start taking things too far and get, you know, physically violent with the kids, I absolutely think I don't want to say it'll be beneficial, because that's obviously not good in any scenario, but yeah, it's not going to stop anything. It's going to make them more pissed off.
Well, that's what motivated me about this, and I would hope that happens with people. I hope this is that thing, because why should it not be college students? That is the example that motivates the rest of us, right? Like, because it is sort of, in a sense, you know, it's one thing for a university to virtue signal and try to play the middle when it comes to, yeah, we want our students to be able to express themselves, but we want to, you know, make sure, you know, they're not doing anti-Semitism or whatever. All right, yeah, kind of weak sauce, but sure. You know, there's another thing for them to be like, oh, you know, there's this or that policy that's being violated, or concern for the university. Again, weak sauce, bullshit, but okay. And I'm even gonna say it's another thing to, once there's incidents on campus, to, you know, now you have police presence and there's arrest and potentially charges, because there was definitely shit going down. All fucking bullshit, but still shit going down. But there's not a lot now when it's you directly punishing the students for engaging in nonviolent protesting, when it's you actually coming down on them and then citing the tent, or citing them breaking curfew, or citing them making noise. Like, that's, you know, and then and to me, that should be us being like, yo, like, what? They're telling college students they can't protest on campus? Oh nah, that's too far. That's way too far. Because again, like, this is a core to our tradition of resistance, right? Like, it's there's this long history of this, and it's like a really bad signal for society if you can't protest genocide on a college campus.
Restricting our right to assemble is like, yeah, the first step towards fucking fascism.
Absolutely. Yeah, all right, we'll roll. Let me know if anybody's got other stuff.
You know, not come to my graduation ceremonies.
Okay. I don't know. It's a weird reaction, if you ask me.
I think it's nerves.
I think it's nervousness.
Yeah.
Some people giggle or laugh when they're
one part of that.
Because I thought she was going to cry at one point.
Right, yeah.
It didn't look like that when I saw it. It's like, okay.
Sounded like it, though.
All right. She'll still earn a degree, right?
I am glad that there is a guarantee that my courses will be taken care of, so I don't have to worry necessarily about my graduation requirements, and the fact that I will earn my degree as I have spent the past 4 years doing.
Okay, so they basically can't go to graduation ceremonies.
That's tough. That's what you work for, man.
Again, if you believe in the cause, that's a small price to pay. If you believe in what you're doing, I mean, and again, I don't know what's in the hearts of all of them. I do not claim to know, but I'm sure for some of them, it's a fervently held belief. They are 100% behind this, and the consequences are what they are.
I'm just disappointed. I mean, I'm a 2020 high school grad, so I wasn't able to walk then.
Okay, I've heard enough. I don't know.
You know, that's the thing about the Columbia ones, too. You've canceled, you know, for anyone where they're canceling it, they're canceling it 4 years after you canceled their high school.
It's terrible.
Right? Those are the same people that didn't get to have a high school graduation.
Right. And, you know, I go back to my friend who was talking
Yeah, this pisses me off because number one, like I said before, like I didn't walk when I got my PhD because of COVID concerns. But again, it's so annoying because they say like they took away, or this is 4 years after you took away their high school graduation, as though again it was the tyranny of the left that took away their graduation rather than the right's utter refusal
Right.
to respond to the fucking deadliest shit since the Spanish flu that took away their ability to graduate.
Not to mention the number of kids, the 300,000 children since Columbine who have been subjected to school shootings. I mean, this is that class, right? We're the graduating class right now are those kids. That wasn't my experience, right?
Mm.
You know, I don't think people realize the impact of one's entire history in school, not ducking under your desk because of nuclear annihilation, but because one of your classmates might be packing a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think that that's got to do something psychologically to an entire generation. And you know, when I think that some of these kids are looking at what's happening as that kind of threat, an entire fucking region is, you know, is looking at a school shooting, sheltering in place, being asked to leave their homes, watching their families destroyed. One side or the other. I mean, I'm not making an equivalence here because I do think that the balance between 3,000 and 30,000 is a rather large one.
Right.
But these kids know that threat. They know it. They've been trained in it. I think it's really kind of incumbent upon people to think about where these kids are coming from and what they're reacting to. The notion of imminent death. They've been taught about it every single fucking day.
Yeah. And they see a world in which mass shootings happening at their schools didn't change
And
anything. Didn't motivate gun control.
There doesn't seem to be any way out.
Yeah. They lived
And
through a
there
pandemic.
is a way out. What they're telling us is there's an other way, and that we really have lost our way in not trying to find that other way. That's what they're telling us. We can't seem to listen, or are unwilling to listen. And our reaction is to do what? To be the school shooter. That's our reaction. That's the administration's reaction, is to go after these kids in situations where the schools, the school administration, or in the case of Philadelphia and the University of Pennsylvania at Penn, even the cops said, we're not going in to root these kids out. When the cops are telling you you're wrong, this is a bad approach,
wow,
you know you're doing something
you know
wrong.
you done fucked up. Yeah.
I mean, the fucking police force that bombed an entire city block tells the Penn administration, don't do this, because we are not going to do this. I mean, what I mean,
that's crazy.
Come on. And these are supposed to be smart people.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That's what should be motivating to the rest of us, because like whatever you think of your workplace, like do you think you have more, out and in front freedom and right to express yourself than they do at a college campus. And they sent in armies of police officers to take down students at Columbia University. I mean, it just shows you there's nothing they won't do to keep in place the order that we have, you know? And again, like, don't forget that when they're trying to tell you all the people had to do and we just wanted to graduate and all of this nonsense, don't forget they could have just listened to the students. Don't forget that would have been the right thing to do anyway. Like that would have been the right thing to do before any of this.
In the places that did do that, there was
They
very
stopped.
little trouble. Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, these are valid points y'all making.
Yeah, when the schools did that, y'all, they agreed to have the encampments down the same day, and the cleanup effort began almost immediately. So that's how you could have got through this without disrupting graduation. And I just want to go ahead and say this before we get into the last portion of this. I'm proud of these students, and I think a lot of them probably understood there could be consequences. I actually think this idea that I think probably some of them were naive, but a lot of them knew. You got to remember they were doing things like part of the reason the camps were there, the tents were there, part of the reason they wore masks, part of the reason they didn't, you know, conduct interviews and they would refer people to the leaders. They definitely were in many cases at least trying to minimize their risk of exposure in you know, facing retaliation for their participation. And I also grant that there's others who maybe, you know, like I said, maybe they really didn't think beyond that, and that's fine. You know, you do what's right. But I think in any case, I would say, I hate to say it, but wear this as a badge of honor. You know, I think if you took a stand for something that was important to you like this, especially this particular issue right now, hey, this is an issue where, like Steph's been getting at, a lot of us are going to have to think about what we're willing to do, because the consequences are real. So, you know, they took a stand for something, and it's unfortunate that the institution is not supporting them, but I hope their families and their friends are. You know, I think people want to troll and act like they're unhireable or whatever. That's crazy. That's crazy. Nah, when you want to build a successful organization, you want leaders, you want change agents. The person I want to hire is the person who's going to tell me when I'm about to do something bad, like a person who's gonna like really, you know, have my back and like and put the institution on the best course possible. So I'm absolutely hiring somebody who's coming out of one of these great academic institutions. One thing I could tell you about these schools is having history with them. They are fantastic academic institutions. What you may think of as a football school or something like that is probably one of the top research institutions in the world. And so a lot of these big schools that have been in these stories, they're outstanding academic institutions. And then to know that from within their student body, you're getting the type of motivated, principled person of integrity that's participating in these protests. Oh no, I'm with that. I'm definitely trying to interview in that. What? Their personal statement? What? Are you kidding? Like, their personal statement is going to be way better than anything their peers are writing.
To yesterday saying, I'm going down to the U of A. We're going to watch our daughter graduate. I don't want to see any of those protesters. You know, he's a dad and he missed his daughter graduating high school. And, you know, that's a big thing, man. That's such a big thing for a parent.
What's up, Joel?
And he missed it.
I'm a free speech guy. If you want to protest, okie dokie.
That's not what I'm not talking about.
You're saying I don't want to see any of these protesters. You might see them.
I'm saying
that's the Constitution.
I'm saying as a parent, you want to have that moment with your kids with not a bunch of people yelling a whole bunch of stuff.
And I told you, I don't think they do their cause very good by disrupting an event. But the idea that there might be people out there protesting on campus, yeah, it could happen.
Not on campus, in the middle of graduation, walking in and people are trying to go up and get their award. And I mean, if you're the schools, you've got to make sure they don't get into the building.
And apparently ASU, U of A, and NAU have things in place, I guess you might say, Gatos, that would prevent something like that from happening.
Thanks for watching Outspoken with Bruce and Gatos. Tap to watch more from
Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess for me, like, I definitely think it's worth having our attention because, for me, it's just important to pay attention to the university's response. And again, just help people realize universities are not these liberal places not these liberal institutions that people make them out to be, in ways that are actually quite problematic. It's not just that, what the right wingers say isn't true. It's also that they seem to be actively engaged in, suppressing free speech and, supporting problematic policies on the world stage. I mean, there's a real corporate thing to these universities. I'll explain some of it to y'all. That's kind of simple to understand. Everybody wants all the money. I know that sounds too simple, but let me put it to you like this and you'll see how it works. Let's say you're a public institution, you're a big state school, you're like whatever state you live in, state university, right? Well, you depend on like state funding and federal funding, right? But you also depend on like tuition and grants and alumni donations and charitable donations, right? And all this type of stuff. And so you realize pretty quickly that even though you're at a public institution, they tend to kind of feel a bit conservative because they're super under the strictures of the government. Like if you're at one of those schools, you're basically a state employee, right? At the same time, if you look at the overall financial vision, what we say, the shorthand that we use is that they're trying to become private. And that might sound crazy to you, but think about it from their perspective. For the most part, what they get from the feds and the states, it's like a relatively like fixed amount, and it's kind of subject to the whims of politicians and things like that, right? Whereas like if they could just create other money, right? A lot of times there's a lot less restriction on that. It's theirs. They can get as much of it as they want, right? And so it's little things like having a ton of international students. Why? Because local students pay in-state tuition. And so students who are out of that, they pay out-of-state tuition. So that's kind of to your benefit. Ooh, we'll make sure we have a lot of out-of-state students. Well, ooh, we can charge international tuition to students from China. Ooh, yeah, that's why there's a lot of students from China, right? Like, it's all good. I mean, that's the economy, and they add a lot to the university. But people understand like that's what's happening. And at the same time, they try to get money from foundations. They try to get money from grants, right? So they try to get a lot of private money. So it ends up being very much like a business that's concerned with its business relationships, and all that stuff makes it inherently conservative. If you're a private institution, it's kind of like the same deal, because you might be a private school, you likely have maybe like a higher tuition from your students and stuff like that, but at the same time, you still want state and federal funding. You're still trying to get grants. So you're trying to get as many public dollars into your institution as possible. And so, like I said, in the end, everybody wants all the money. And so it's just kind of the realities of academic life. And I don't know, like I don't want to sound like I'm crapping on the institutions. Like I enjoy being an academic. Like I enjoy teaching. I enjoy research. I genuinely enjoy working at a university. There's a lot of great things that come with working at a university. There is a unique professional culture at universities that I find to be pretty sweet. Most of the people are incredibly competent and also passionate professionals, and they're like literally a joy to work with. I can probably like literally count on one hand the people I've ever had to deal with in my career that I genuinely don't like. I just hear the way institutions are talked about in the news and in the media, and I think that influences the way people think about the institutions in ways that are not helpful because they're just not realistic. The university is a business, and the better and more you keep that in mind, then like the better you do. It might be a cool business. It's a pretty decent business model at times. But yeah, it's just not a liberal place. Kind of rambling, but I actually wanted to get a lot of that out. All right. The other thing I want to make sure I say before I go is the students. Like, I really just think what they're doing is super cool. I encourage them. I know a lot of the students have actually said that they're committed to staying there. So like there's cases where like the students are graduating. A lot of them are like seniors, so technically they're kind of done. But a lot of them are saying they're gonna remain on campus or remain in place to kind of see this through. I respect that commitment. Other people are like just missing commencement. So like they're seniors, they're kind of done. They're not going to walk or graduate, but they're finished. And others will be back. So, but I commend them. You know, it is rough that their institutions have taken it this way. It's a shame on the institution, but they'll be okay. I think in the end, they're on the right side of history, and you know, they'll be all right. They'll be all right. I really do believe that they'll be okay, and it's more a shame on the university than them. And I hope that this doesn't discourage students from speaking out, organizing, and doing what they think is best. But yeah, I got this beautiful panel of people here with me, so we'll see what else they've got to say. Ember, Steph, Maya, Sumami, anybody?
Oh, I'm still editing.
Yeah,
Ember's editing.
You know, it was a good discussion for sure.
Yeah.
You know, it's just really strange to see this all going. I have this tremendous sense of deja vu, and like the very young, I'm very old now, and to see it from one side to the other, it's like I'm like, yeah, I don't give a shit. You know, I'm just gonna, yeah, this is I when I say I don't give a shit, I give a shit a great deal about the injustices that are in the future, but they're not in my future, they're in yours. And I hope y'all wake up. They're in those kids' futures. At least they can see it. They can see the interim between their 20s and their 70s. They can see that interim, and they don't like it. And y'all that are in that mid-range, I don't like it either. But you know what? I have an exit strategy. It's either, I don't have much longer to hang around here. I'll do what I can while I'm here. But, you know, the future is grim for me, 10 years, 20. Yeah, I don't really want to live to 100. But it's that middle time. What do you, the most consequential time in any human being's life is in between. And you can either do immense amounts of good or immense amounts of really, really bad. Make a choice. Where do you want to, in therapy, people ask you all the time, where do you want to be in 10 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Well, at this point in my life, that question is, where do I want to be in 10 years? Well, hopefully healthy, if not dead. you know,
Right.
and so it's a matter of some import that even though I won't see it, it's a matter of some import to me that some residual goodness is left on this planet where people don't have to experience this level of hatred on the basis of ethnic rivalry, of territorial rivalry, of jealously guarding their own bigotries. There's got to be a better way. There has to be. And there really is, if we just give up some of these ridiculous assumptions that this is the way it is and it's the way it always will be. That's the Christian mantra. As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be. Sicut erat in principio. As in, it's just no. We've been saying this for 2,000 years, and it's not acceptable. We can do better.
Absolutely. So yeah, for me, like a big thing is you don't have to agree with these students, but and by the way, in principle, I definitely do. But we have to understand what we're dealing with. So to me, one thing is it fits into the wider context. Like you talk about, Steph, the arc of history is not going to bend towards justice unless we actively work and go about bending it.
Lean on the bow.
Yeah. And I just think about the war on LGBTQ people, the all the racist stuff we see, the class war we find ourselves in the middle of, all of these struggles. It's sort of with that at the backdrop that I see the crackdown on college protest. And it is also the issue because let's be real, the rhetoric about these kids is that they're so entitled and they're so selfish and they're so woke that they're caught up in this sort of selfish, shallow culture war ideology, when in reality, these kids are taking up the moral question of our time. And by the way, they're answering the bell correctly. And we're dealing with the notion of genocide. We're dealing with the notion of trying to destroy a people, right? And you're dealing with something that, again, like Vietnam or something, is halfway across the world to these students. So it's with all that other stuff in the backdrop that you take them trying to speak up about this being squashed, that you go, this is painting a picture that's quite alarming.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole notion of questioning authority, right? I mean, and that is precisely what, if you look at where the focus of the right wing is now, I think that this is tricky. I think that academic institutions are inherently conservative. They're not liberal. But they do teach the liberal arts.
Such a
And
great way to put it.
And the liberal arts encourage thought and evaluation, which is inherently a questioning of authority. It's a questioning of by what authority we have knowledge. And this is why, particularly religious conservatives, are focused on shutting that shit down. As that legislator from Missouri, I believe it was, said women can do when it comes to having kids, which is like, dude, you know what? You really ought to have been sitting up in biology class at some point in time. But, they want to shut down that notion that authority is always subject to question, always subject to examination, not necessarily to be rejected, but questioned. Where does this come from? And that is the nature of democratic ideals and enlightenment ideals. We're the whole idea of natural rights is not natural in terms of human thought throughout many, many centuries until the 16th and 17th. But it's been a remarkably effective tool in fashioning imperfect institutions of human liberty, both in politics and in thought. We've made tremendous progress embracing the notion that authority is not something to be simply accepted, but something to be examined. And if we stop examining it, we stagnate as a species. It doesn't make sense to do that. Now, does it?
Yeah, and that's the thing I think that makes it a more of a global concern is, again, you don't have to agree with the students, but you should understand where they're coming from. But even if you don't, it should be important to you that they're not intimidated. Yes, that they're right, that it's not intimidation.
You should dispute them. You shouldn't oppress them. You shouldn't kill them. You should dispute them. If you have an argument, dispute the argument. And the thing is that the people that are standing in authority refuse to engage. And engagement with these questions is critical. And it seems to me that we seem to be allergic to engagement.
And that's the other thing. That's
pushing it off.
That's what'll look bad in history, is that they'll try to say that not saying anything, not coming up with an official position was not engaging, and we'll say, I think arresting them and suspending them and not allowing them to graduate.
That's not engaging. That's suppressing. That's come on now.
But yeah, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for the Gather Gang for joining me. This was sort of a spontaneous stream. But yeah, we'll be here hanging out. There are links in the description. Don't forget, Ember's got videos coming up. Link in the description. Subscribe to Stephanie's channel. Link in the description. Steph, what else you got coming up?
Well, hey, I guess tomorrow with Ember and Bree and Carly Chardonnay Webb, the transpositions. We're talking about the news in the realm of well, what the news is saying about trans rights and trans issues and people generally. I mean, we're not unipolar, or we haven't consulted the trans agenda as dispatched by the leaders of the trans cult. We just sort of make shit up and well, no, we don't make shit up. We call attention to things that maybe people want to be paying attention to as it affects trans people. So I've got that coming up. Something on Saturday, I think, on Skeptic Haven, Women Atheists Unload, but we haven't quite figured out that whole thing. Balls in the air. Also coming up is Friday. I'm putting together a couple of sailboats to put in the water on Saturday, and I'm going to be sailing. If you haven't looked, if you haven't seen, I was over measuring J24s last Saturday, touching grass. And you know what? Everybody should do a lot of that, because this isn't all there is. But, there's joy here.
Nope, this isn't even what
there's a lot to worry about, but there's a lot of joy too. So yeah, check all that shit out. That's what I got going on.
This is mostly an excuse to hang out with you fine folks and vent about some things in the process. Go ahead, Ember.
Oh, just yay.
Yeah, for sure. Also, subscribe to Maya's channel. Make sure you check out Bad Science Sunday and the other content Maya makes when Maya gets inspired. But yeah, there's a link in the description for that. There isn't a link in the description for Sumami's channel because Sumami doesn't have a channel right now. But we're trying to coax Sumami into getting her channel going.
Videos.
All right, well, go to Sumami's channel and check out the cat videos until she starts putting some other stuff up there. Yeah. And look, y'all, just like support your local students, right? Like there's probably something going on in your community. There's probably a lot going on with the students. Buy them a slice of pizza if you see them. Honk at them if you see them in the streets. Whatever you got to do to show them some love.
And if you got a student that's like sitting around your dinner table or something, talk to them. Ask them questions.
Yeah, definitely. And if they're graduating and they didn't get to go, let them know you're proud of them. Because I've been there. It sucks. Not gonna lie, it's kind of rough. But
give them a mortar board.
They'll be all right. Yeah. No, you know what? You realize in the end, you earned it. It's okay. Like I said, they'll be fine. We're proud of them. All right, gang. I love you guys. There's links in the description for all that. We'll see you next time.